Chapter 17. Untitled Tragedy. Against her pupils, those hazel canvases, an image was stamped. A burning house, her family home, her family itself. That girl managed to escape, though she couldn't tell you how. She'd been asleep, zombified, until the smell of smoke and her coughing woke her, sat in grass, and guided to safety. People came to fight the blaze with their horse-drawn, manually pumped engines. But for a long period, their water had little success in drowning it. She was lucky to have survived. That's what they kept telling her. The girl knew it, as anyone would in the face of such a danger, but she lacked the reason why she had, why everything in her world on that night needed to change, and why that, instead of her, it was her innocence that needed to die. Away from her bubble, amid the active hive of bobbies and Merryweather helmets, a carriage whinnied to a stop at the edge of the road, carrying a different sort of responder. A clergyman, whose collar was a welcome sight of reprieve for the overburdened uniform that was there to impart to him the very moment he stepped down. Apologies for the inconvenience, Father, but we didn't know who else to send for. No apologies necessary, Constable. I am a servant of the Lord, and his work pays no consideration for the hour, the priest responded. What can you tell me? Not much, I'm afraid, the officer answered somberly. The place had taken to flame like a box of matches by the time we arrived, and the girl was sitting outside. Information has been a struggle on account of her refusal to communicate. She hasn't moved from that spot, nor taken her eyes off the house. And you're sure there isn't a relative or friend that would take her? If there is, we don't know how to reach them, and if what's been said about Hargraves is to be believed, there won't be. Hargraves? You mean the artisan Hargraves? The very same, sir, the constable nodded in confession. A visionary with tools, respected in business, and good with customers, but not so with his family. His wife and daughter were the strict exception. Her name is Alice, by the way. Learning the name of the victim wouldn't make the job the priest was tasked with better whatsoever. It never did. The only modicum of positivity he derived was knowing who to pray for, on whose behalf to ask God to be swaddled in a shroud of his love and peace during this tribulation. He approached the girl slowly, solely for his sake, wanting the confidence that his thoughts and words were in order before going too far. He stood behind her. He knew he wasn't in a blind spot, that his presence was felt, but she was ignoring it. He was being as casually discarded as the rest of the community, moiling to save her. Hello, Alice. That's a mighty inviting bit of grass you're sitting on. Do you mind sharing it for a while? He entered, speaking as warmly as the heat brushing against her cheeks. She continued to be afflicted with deafness and not acknowledge the priest's request, leaving him to assume that the insufficient resistance or reaction to the contrary was her form of permission. So, in his jovial spirit, the large, as in slightly overweight middle-aged men with bad knees, clumsily found the way to his rump beside her through vocalizations of part discomfort and the other plain effort. When he had situated to his liking, he chortled a side remark about how soft and pillowy it was, a segue to the heart of their communion. That nice constable over there tells me you aren't talking, not telling what's happened. Is it because he's a stranger? I suppose from here everyone is. You don't recognize a single face, do you? Well, I I have an elementary way of making one less for you to worry over. My name is Father Ambrose, and I'm very pleased to make your acquaintance. Alice, what you've experienced tonight is a pure and unfair nightmare of life. He switched, engaging with his blasé crickets more morosely. You don't want to look at me, and you want to talk even less because you have nothing to say. It'll take a long time to find the correct words, but I know you're feeling a lot. You're hurt, angry, confused, scared, and that's okay. Feel those things. Be those things. I've not come to stop you, but I am here to help you. Maybe that's the more terrifying part of all this mess for someone in your shoes. We don't have to pretend. All I can say to that, the only promise I can make, is I am not a replacement for your parents. I could never be. Not when God created them special, just for you. What I can be instead is a friend, and that's all I really want to be. Someone for you to lean on, to look after you and decide what's best, to care about you. And if it's the hereafter you're nervous about, it won't be easy, but we'll face it together. It's going to take trust, something that's earned and will grow stronger if nurtured. But right now, we need just enough between us to pull each other out of this grass so we can take the first and biggest leap of faith in our adventure. What do you say, Alice? Turning those hazel diamonds to him, the girl cracked a demure smile, a gesture that would be the foundation of that trust in one another, both a breakthrough and a blessing to Father Ambrose. Chapter 18. Malgerious. St. Perrot's Home for Children, an establishment managed by Father Ambrose and the sisters of his parish, was a microscopic look at the aspects of society he despised. This disgust, dare he call it hatred, was in direct conflict with his fundamental teachings of compassion and tolerance for the world, and therefore a sin he frequently tried to purge himself of while knelt in front of the cross. This duty he viewed as a purgatory in the calling for which he sacrificed and suffered often, was to oversee an overflow of castaway youth, the number of boys and girls that were either abandoned to the street by at least one still living parent, or forced out of a crowded home and into the dingy alleys, was increasing daily, but the vast majority of them that the priest had gotten familiar with, he knew were doomed for the workhouse. The smallest percentage was those matching the truest and typical definition of orphan, those like Alice. It was a difficult adjustment, the environment of St. Perrot's, and she wasn't acclimating well. Obedient but socially inept, the nuns would describe her as, behaviors that predictably ostracized her from the other children. They'd tease, laugh, and gossip to themselves about the freak without a tongue, or the girl that must be dead inside like a porcelain doll. It wasn't irregular for Father Ambrose to find his introverted friend alone, happily closed into her designated bedroom. The nuns would set the routine by voicing their concerns enough to convince him to peek in and check on her, see if all their nagging was justified. Most of the time he deemed it wasn't, just tomfoolery he could look past. A game of hide-and-seek under beds or in wardrobes. Some secret safety space he'd have to trespass on and coax her out of. There does always seem to be that one time, though. There was none of that. He scanned the rows of cots and located her easily on hers, the one bookending her row, nearest to the window. Yet again I find you in here, and yet again I've been cornered by a very perturbed Sister Katie, who's curious as to why you're not outside playing with the others, he notified, shutting the door behind him and walking down the short aisle. I don't know, I just don't want to, she said firmly in reply, but without raising her head from the activity in her lap. The beauty of God's creation should never be wasted, especially when we get the chance to enjoy it under clear skies. He smiles on England today, Ambrose rejoined, stopping at the foot of her bed. After noticing that it was a fountain pen in the hand meeting with paper that had her so enthralled, he added appreciatively, "Oh, but I see the sunshine has inspired creativity. Tell me then, whose likeness is it you're intently attempting to capture?" Alice stopped to judge her progress for a moment. A man, drawn with a budding yet underdeveloped skill, in multiple poses and stages of completion. Mostly, it was a suit of armor she had. The details, particularly those regarding the face, were vague and evidently what was puzzling her. I don't know. I've never seen him before, but they call him Malgerious. They, you say? And what's this Malgerious done to be worthy of this portrait? He was a great knight who bravely fought against very bad people, and became a king, though I'm not sure whereof, she dignified, spouting a convincing lore. A fantastical Lionheart. His would be a good story if you decided to write it down. But father, this isn't a fairy tale character I've imagined. He was real, and I saw him, in the fire at my house. Alice expostulated ardently. Her alibi seemed to have an effect on the priest's perspective. Along with the creeping dreariness in his tone came a presumption that as to the impetus behind her art. Oh, my child, how do I make you understand? This monomania, this connection to death you feel, is because you've lived it. And this man is a hero, probably not too unlike your parents that you've created to die in their place. Such visions are simply hauntings of what you've survived, and we must pray that they, as well as the guilt over it, pass quickly. No, I haven't created anybody, she stuttered in mitigation of his logical tack, retrieving a stack of unseen papers from under her pillow, and energetically pointing to a specific drawing at the top as she handed them to him. I didn't see him long before he disappeared, eaten by the blaze. But then there was him, another king, a relative maybe. He too led a war. Only his was against these horrible dragon-like monsters. Ambrose thumbed through the portfolio of finished works he'd been given, much more vividly designed and obsessively detailed. He stopped, a bit shorter than planned, when he uncovered the outlandish, six-eyed, horned and feathered beast she was currently referring to. Well, that further explains it was all a dream, doesn't it? Dragons aren't real, they don't exist. Here they are. In this place, wherever it is, they do, and I saw them that night. I stared deep into the flames, and I didn't look away until I was sure. Please, Father, I know you don't believe me, but I need you to trust that what I'm telling you isn't the corruption of Satan, his filth spewing from my mouth. The priest's mind was racing. It was spinning, twisting, and even loop-de-looping. He was unsure what to say to her, how to proceed. So he paused, attempting to stabilize himself, with a second glance at the lifeless sketch of whom the girl claimed was a king. I think we should discuss this later. The others will be returning inside soon, ready for chapel. We should get ready too. Don't want the sisters disciplining us for tardiness like last time, eh? That's gonna wrap up another episode for us, guys. I hope, as always, you enjoyed this duo of chapters that start this very, very special third act to this story. And as always, we'll see you in the next video.